Chapter 3, Section 10 in the workbook is entitled Dividing Fractions and Mixed Numbers, and this is the homework helper for that section. So, what we learned in class today is a couple different things about division, especially when it talks about fractions. A, division doesn't really exist when we're talking about fractions. We actually change it to multiplication. And B, what effect that has on the problem is after we change it to multiplication, in order to make the result work out correctly, we have to flip the second fraction around, which is called the reciprocal. So when I'm looking at question number 2, I'm not going to do 1/5 divided by 1/4. You've never divided fractions that way, not just in my class, at any point in your past. That same fact should be true. What you want to do is change the problem to multiplication and flip the second fraction, the one after the sign. Not the first one, not the one before, the one after. Once you've done that, it looks like exactly what you did in Chapter 3, Section 9, multiplying. Multiply straight across and you'll come up with your answer. 4 times 1 is 4, and 5 times 1 is 5. Okay. So if we go to number 10 now, we'll employ the same techniques, but what you see is a couple little things here. You do have a mixed number here, which you're going to have to change to an improper fraction. Also, you have a negative here. Remember, from our sign rules back when we talked about multiplying and dividing integers, we know when we have an odd number of negative signs, the answer is going to be negative. So when we're done, we're going to want to make sure we stick a negative sign on that answer. But it doesn't really affect anything else as far as the computation. So let's make our little change here. 6 1/4 is going to change into 25/6. 6 times 4 is 24, plus 1 is 25, and it's going to stay over the denominator, which is 6. And I can stick that negative back in front, but I won't use it right now for anything. Alright, and this 1/3, well, since this is a division problem, it's not actually going to be 1/3. It's going to be 3/1. And that's going to change to multiplication. And now I can go to town as far as solving these questions. Now, this is one of those questions like we saw yesterday. I can reduce first if I want to, and I want to. On this diagonal with the 3 and the 6, I could pull 3 out of both of those. 3 divided by 3 is 1, and 6 divided by 3 is 2. And now what I would do is I'd multiply straight across. So I've got 25 times 1, 25. Notice I got my negative sign while I was at it. And 2 times 1, which is 2. And so we could leave it like that, or if that's bothering you, we could change it to a mixed number, which is 12 1/2. 2 goes into 25 12 times without going over. Would leave me a remainder of 1. And the denominator stays 2. And I remembered my negative sign. And that would be my answer for number 10. Okay, let's go to a story problem now. You're going to make sure you employ those same techniques that you saw in 2 and 10 for that whole top section, 1 to 18. The story problem for number 19 says Burger Barn has 46 2/3 pounds of ground beef. That's a big burger. How many 1/3 pound burgers can be made using all the ground beef? So we're only going to make 1/3 pound burgers. We're on a bit of a diet. Now, obviously, since this section is dividing, they obviously want us to divide the 1/3 out to figure out how many burgers we're going to make. Alright, so as far as this goes now, you know that this is not going to work for me, and I'm going to have to change this to multiplication and flip the fraction. You told me all the things I had to do without me actually hearing a sound. So I'm going to do 46 times 3 here. 46 times 3 is going to change into 138 plus 2 is 140, so that's 140 over 3 times, remember I changed it to multiplication, and then I flip this guy around, 3/1, and now I can simplify. Right? So I could multiply and reduce, or I could reduce and multiply. This one's really easy to reduce first, because on this diagonal they're both 3's. If I chop 3 out of both of those, they become 1's. So this is 140 over 1 or a fancy way of saying 140. And in context of the question, what does that mean? That means that they're going to be able to make 140 burgers from that 46 2/3 pounds of beef.